Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase. One continuous cyclic movement from which all of reality unfolds. When phi begins to change, its first derivatives appear, and with them, the three dimensions show themselves at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v, built from both. Every higher derivative is a finer question about how phi changes, and each one casts three shadows together: a time shadow, a space shadow, and a motion shadow. These echoes mix and weave into one another, forming the patterns we call fields, particles, bodies, thoughts, and worlds. In this picture, everything that exists is a living tapestry of phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. Today, we focus on one essential component of the epistemic firewall. In this part 27, we penetrate to the deepest layer of causal deception. We confront, confounding in window ensembles. This is the firewall mechanism that exposes how even a carefully controlled intervention can be tricked by a hidden, unmeasured facet of phi that influences both the cause and the effect. The core revelation is subtle and powerful. Confounding occurs when a hidden driver makes two variables appear causally linked. In holophase terms, a latent phi structure biases the window ensemble, so omega k bike v patterns mimic causality. The skill you will gain is that of a confounder hunter. You will learn to suspect, design tests for, and bound the influence of hidden variables that can corrupt even your best experiments and create perfect illusions of cause and effect. Our core question is precise. How can a hidden common cause create a false causal signal that survives a simple intervention? This question targets the most sophisticated form of inferential error. We have learned that correlation is not causation. We have learned that causation requires intervention. But what if our intervention is imperfect? What if the variable we are intervening on, A, and the outcome we measure, B, are both also influenced by a third unmeasured variable, C, a confounder? If our intervention on A does not break the link from C to A, or if C also changes as a result of our intervention, then our intervention test can be fooled. We may see a change in B when we manipulate A and mistakenly conclude A causes B, when in fact both changes were driven by the hidden confounder C. The firewall's confounder check exists to force us to search for these hidden drivers and to quantify their potential to distort our causal inferences. Why is this necessary? The failure mode it prevents is the illusion of mechanistic understanding. It is when we believe we have found the causal lever, built a technology or policy upon it, and later discover it works or fails for reasons entirely different from our model. The confounder is the ghost in the machine, the unseen hand that puppeteers both our cause and effect. Without hunting for confounders, our causal maps are incomplete and dangerously misleading. In holophase terms, the problem is one of incomplete windows. Our measurement windows capture certain projections of phi, certain omega, k, and v echoes. But the confounder C is a pattern in phi that our windows do not capture, or capture poorly. It is a latent phi structure. Because it is latent, hidden, it is not included in our data ensemble or our causal model. Yet, it influences the patterns we do see, A and B. Our inferred rule, G-A-B, is therefore misspecified. The true rule is C-A and C-B, or some more complex network involving C. In the triunity, confounders can hide in each dimensional echo biasing our window ensemble in specific ways. 1. Omega confounder, temporal. A shared clock, phase reference, timing drift, or synchronization artifact. For example, two electronic sensors might share a common power supply that introduces a 60 Hz noise hum, an omega artifact. If you intervene on the reading of sensor A by tapping it, the hum in both sensors might fluctuate together, making it seem like your tap caused the change in sensor B. The hidden confounder is the noisy power supply's omega signature. 2. K confounder, spatial. A shared geometry, boundary bias, or spatial sampling artifact. For example, you study plant growth, B, in response to a fertilizer, A, applied in different plots. But a hidden confounder, C, is a gradient of water drainage, a K pattern, across the field. The drainage influences both how much fertilizer is retained and how well plants grow. Your intervention, applying fertilizer, does not break the link from drainage to growth. If you don't measure and control for drainage, your causal estimate for fertilizer will be biased. 3. A shared frame drift, hidden motion coupling, or transport bias. For example, in studying the effect of a drug A on patient recovery B, a confounder C could be the socioeconomic status of the hospital, a V condition affecting both the quality of drug administration and the overall quality of care, which influences recovery. Your intervention, administering the drug, occurs within this confounded context. The profound implication is that energy tallies can be perfectly maintained by a confounded system, creating the illusion of a direct causal channel. Two systems may show a beautiful, conserved exchange of energy, momentum, heat, money, but this exchange might be mediated entirely by a hidden third system. The mysterious transfer or unexplained energy exchange that sometimes puzzles physicists and engineers is often a signature of an unmodeled confounder, a hidden fee structure participating in the tally. The operational interpretation of this is the practice of controlled experimentation, blocking, and sensitivity analysis. In a perfect randomized controlled trial, you randomly assign subjects to treatment A or control. This randomization is designed to break the link between any potential confounder C and the treatment assignment A. On average, confounders should be equally distributed between groups, thus controlling for them. But true randomization is often impossible in observational studies or complex systems. The confounder hunter must then use other tools: instrumental variables, regression discontinuity, matching methods, or most importantly, direct measurement and inclusion of suspected confounders. The firewall role, therefore, is that of the latent structure auditor. When a causal rule GAB is presented, with evidence from interventions, you must ask, what are the plausible latent fee structures C that could influence both A and B? Have they been measured? Has their influence been blocked, controlled, or bounded? You are auditing the completeness of the causal model. Let us formalize this. Let the true data generating process be a function of phi, which includes a latent confounder C. True process: A equals F1C UA, B equals F2C A UB. Here, UA and UB are independent noise. The confounder C influences both A and B. If we ignore C, we fit a model. Misspecified model, B equals G A epsilon. The estimated function G and its parameters will be biased because they will absorb the effect of the omitted C. Even an intervention on A that does not affect C, a perfect intervention, would allow us to estimate the true effect of A. But if the intervention itself is correlated with C, or if we cannot perform a perfect intervention, the bias remains. The firewall's check is to demand the confounder disclosure bound. For any licensed causal rule, the HLS metaform must include a field, potential confounders. This field lists the plausible omega, k, and v confounders that have been considered and the evidence that their influence is negligible or has been accounted for. This evidence can be randomization. The intervention randomly assigns A, breaking links to C. Measurement and control. C was measured and its effect statistically removed. 3. Physical argument. A domain-specific argument based on other license laws that C cannot influence both A and B in the relevant regime. 4. Sensitivity analysis. A mathematical demonstration that for the conclusion to be reversed, the unmeasured confounder would have to be implausibly strong. Let us state with crystalline clarity what is allowed and what is forbidden at this gate. What is allowed? You are allowed to propose causal rules from imperfect experiments and observational data. However, you must explicitly disclose and bound the influence of plausible confounders. You must state the limits of your control. You are allowed to use causal language if you have followed protocols, like randomization, designed to mitigate confounding, and you have tested for residual confounding. What is forbidden? You may not claim a causal relationship while ignoring obvious, plausible confounders without justification. Assume that because an intervention was performed, all confounding is automatically eliminated. The intervention itself can be confounded. Dismiss the need for confounder analysis by claiming your measurement is direct or clean without evidence. Hide the list of considered and rejected confounders. What happens when the check fails? The license consequence is strict. Fail, require confounder disclosure bounds. Otherwise, the rule cannot be licensed as causal. If a proponent cannot or will not provide a reasonable analysis of potential confounders, the firewall blocks the causal license. The rule may be licensed as a provisional causal association with a prominent warning about unmeasured confounding, and its scope is restricted to contexts where the listed confounders are believed to be controlled. It cannot be used for high-stakes decision-making without further validation. Now, we must state the explicit prediction and falsification for the confounding detection concept. Prediction: if the relationship is confounded. If you introduce a control window or an experimental condition where the suspected confounder C is altered, decoupled, or held constant, the apparent causal link between A and B will weaken or disappear, while the signature of the true driver, C's effect, will persist. For example, if you suspect a shared power supply, omega confounder, is causing two instruments to correlate, run them on separate, isolated power supplies. The correlation should vanish. The prediction is dissociation under confounder control. Falsification condition for a confounding hypothesis. If the relationship between A and B survives a series of controls targeting different omega, k, and v confounders, then confounding is unlikely to be the full explanation. If you rule out one plausible hidden driver after another and the causal signal remains robust, the case for a direct or mediated causal link strengthens. The falsification is robustness to confounder targeting controls. A classic example from epidemiology is the relationship between coffee drinking and heart disease. Early observational studies found a correlation. A plausible confounder was smoking. Smokers tend to drink more coffee and have high rates of heart disease. If you don't measure and control for smoking, coffee appears to cause heart disease. This is a V confounder, a behavioral cluster. When later studies measured smoking and statistically controlled for it, the apparent effect of coffee greatly diminished. The confounder hypothesis was confirmed. The relationship was largely, though not entirely, confounded. Let us explore an analogy from the complex interplay of weather patterns, wheat harvests, and rural to urban migration in the greater Kandahar region over the last half century. An economist studies decades of data. He observes a strong recurring pattern. Years of poor wheat harvest in the rural districts around Kandahar are followed, with a lag of about 18 months, by a measurable increase in population growth in the city of Kandahar. He posits a direct causal rule. Poor wheat harvests cause increased rural to urban migration, swelling the city. He cites mechanisms. Economic hardship pushes people off the land. The correlation is strong, the temporal lag, omega, seems right. He even points to intervention-like events. A severe drought in 1971 was followed by a notable migration spike. A demographer, acting as a confounder hunter, is skeptical. She asks, what hidden could cause both poor harvests and, independently, drive migration to Kandahar with an 18-month lag? She identifies a prime candidate: large-scale conflict and insecurity. Here is the confounding structure. Major conflict episodes. For example, the Soviet invasion and counterinsurgency, the Civil War periods, the post-2001 insurgency. Conflict is a complex phi pattern with strong omega, K, and V signatures. C. Poor harvest A. Conflict destroys irrigation canals, K damage, forces farmers from fields, V displacement, and disrupts fertilizer supply chains, V disruption. It directly causes poor harvests. C. Migration to Kandahar, B. Conflict creates direct insecurity, driving people to seek the relative safety of the provincial capital, a V movement. Crucially, this migration often occurs during or immediately after the intense conflict period. The lag illusion. The poor harvest, A, becomes apparent at the end of a growing season. The conflict-driven migration, B, may begin earlier but continues and is often recorded in urban census data later as people settle. The Economist, looking at annual agricultural and census data, sees harvest failure at year T and population increase in city data for year T+1 or T+2. He infers A, B with a lag, but the true driver is Mika. The drought of 1971, it coincided with pre-war political instability and state weakness, a confounder. The intervention test is tricky. You cannot ethically create a poor harvest, but you can look for control windows. The confounder hunter looks for periods of poor harvest without major conflict, perhaps due to a purely climatic drought in a peaceful period. She also looks for periods of major conflict that did not severely impact harvests, perhaps intense urban fighting in Kandahar city itself during a time when rural areas were secure. Her prediction? In the poor harvest, no conflict control window, the migration spike to Kandahar should be much smaller. In the conflict good harvest control window, migration to Kandahar should still be high. If the Economist's direct causal rule G were true, migration should only follow harvest failure, regardless of conflict. The data, when this refined analysis is done, often supports the confounder hypothesis. The migration signal is stronger and more tightly coupled to conflict episodes, C, than to harvest yields, A. The apparent causal link between harvests and migration weakens under this confounder control analysis. It was largely confounded by insecurity. The firewall's license consequence is applied. The Economist rule, G, is not licensed as a primary causal law. Its license is amended to include a major warning. Relationship likely confounded by security conditions. Not to be used for predicting migration in the absence of conflict analysis. To get a causal license, the economist must either 1. Measure and explicitly model the confounder, C, security, in his equations. 2. Conduct a sensitivity analysis showing that even an implausibly strong independent effect of harvests would be needed to explain the data. 3. Find a natural experiment where harvests varied independently of conflict, e.g., a localized pest outbreak in a secure district, and show the migration effect persists. In Holophase science, the harvest and migration are observed patterns A-phi and B-phi. The conflict is a broader, latent phi structure, C-phi, that our simple economic window did not fully capture. The economist saw a correlated rhythm, omega, and a plausible story. The confounder hunter demanded we check for a hidden driver that could orchestrate both rhythms. This happens constantly in science, between sunspots and stock markets, between educational attainment and health, between neural firing and conscious perception. The confounder is the always possible hidden hand. This discipline is a rigorous enactment of the episode 11 axioms. Rules do not become real by elegance, consensus, or tradition. They earn a license only by surviving falsification, variation, independence, and scope discipline. The confounder check is a deep test of independence. It asks, is the variation in A that we're using to infer its effect on B independent of other causes of B? Randomization seeks to create this independence. Controlling for confounders seeks to restore it statistically. Without independence, the inference is not disciplined. And the cardinal rule. When a rule fails, we do not believe harder. We tighten, downgrade, or retire its license. When a causal claim is shown to be vulnerable to plausible confounding, we do not ignore the threat. We downgrade the certainty of the claim. We tighten its scope to the conditions where confounders are controlled. We may retire it from guiding policy until the confounder is bounded. The skill you gain from this part is causal skepticism and design refinement. You learn to instinctively ask, what's the hidden third thing, when you see a beautiful correlation or even an intervention result? You learn to design experiments not just to intervene on A, but to break the potential links from hidden C to A and B. You learn the art of blocking, controlling for known confounders, and the science of sensitivity analysis, quantifying how strong an unmeasured confounder would need to be to threaten your conclusion. This skill has immediate vital application. In drug development, a new drug shows a positive effect in a trial. But were the patients in the treatment group also by chance younger or healthier, a V confounder? Rigorous trial design uses randomization and blinding to block these confounders. A gene variant is associated with the disease. Is it causal, or is it in linkage disequilibrium, a K confounder on the chromosome, with the true causal variant nearby? Fine mapping and functional experiments are needed to rule out this genetic confounding. In cosmology, the apparent acceleration of the universe's expansion is inferred from supernova data. A potential confounder is interstellar dust, a K confounder that could dim the supernovae in a way that mimics acceleration. Years of work were dedicated to measuring and ruling out this and other astrophysical confounders before the acceleration was accepted as likely real. In machine learning fairness, an algorithm appears to predict job performance, but it might be confounded by historical hiring bias, a omega confounder in the training data. The algorithm learns to associate a zip code, a proxy for race, with performance, not because of causality, but because of past discriminatory hiring. Detecting and correcting for this confounding is a major challenge. Finally, let us summarize the epistemic function of this part. Let us crystallize what we have built. We have defined confounding in window ensembles. This firewall mechanism guards against hidden common causes that can create false causal signals, even in the presence of interventions. Confounders are latent fee structures that bias our data ensembles. The firewall acts as a latent structure auditor. It demands that proponents of causal rules disclose, measure, control for, or bound the influence of plausible omega, k, and v confounders. The explicit prediction for a confounded relationship is dissociation under confounder control. The apparent causal link weakens when the hidden driver is altered or held constant. The explicit falsification condition for a confounding hypothesis is robustness to confounder targeting controls. The causal signal persists after multiple attempts to rule out hidden drivers. The license consequence is mandatory confounder disclosure. Without it, a causal license is denied or severely restricted. This strengthens the firewall by adding a completeness check. It ensures that our causal models are not just consistent with the data we have, but are robust to the data we might have about hidden variables. It forces us to think about the shadows cast by unseen parts of phi. With this, the firewall's causal verification system is complete. It tests for the leap from correlation to causation, part 26, and then for the hidden traps that can fool even an intervention test, part 27. A causal rule that earns a license has survived both the poke and the search for the hidden hand guiding the poke. This represents the highest standard of empirical knowledge. It is why we can trust a bridge designed by physics or a vaccine tested by a clinical trial. The process has hunted for ghosts and found none, or has quantified their potential influence. If you want to see the full mathematical derivations and exact equations behind this idea, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo. There, you will find the scientific papers that this audio journey is built on. Carry the light of the confounder hunter. Cultivate a disciplined paranoia about hidden drivers. In a world of immense complexity, where phi's tapestry has countless interwoven threads, the most dangerous mistake is to think you see a simple thread of causation where none exists. Your vigilance is what keeps science honest and its applications safe. Now, we arrive at a profound challenge. How do we learn about causality in systems where we cannot, or dare not, perform brute force interventions? How do we poke the universe gently, intelligently, to learn its secrets without breaking the very thing we're studying? This requires minimal intervention discipline. Salam and peace be upon you.